give Chuck Schumer a grade.
And I don't think giving him a grade is helpful.
At the end of the week, Washington empties out fast. Lawmakers, staffers, they're all heading home. But not before they stop here.
Hello and welcome back to the Punchbowl News Townhouse for another episode of Flyout Day. Jake, it has been a very exciting and busy week at Punchbowl News with the launch of our third policy vertical, defense.
We're not going to be on defense. We're going to be on offense when it comes
Covering
to
defense.
Covering
That's
we're pumped about this. This is one of the, of all the issues on Capitol Hill and in town with industry, with the Pentagon, defense is one of the biggest. It's so much money, so much drama, both on the Hill, at the Pentagon, and the administration, among the companies, the primes, the startups, all that stuff. It's a super fertile area for us to go at.
And we have two excellent reporters helming our coverage, including Anthony Andrade and Briana Reilly. They are experts when it comes to policy, procedure, and also how the industry is making moves, who the new players are. It's going to be a really critical area for us.
Follow them both on Twitter, email them. You could find their email addresses. I don't know them off the top of my head. They are going to shake things up on the Hill. They already are. They've owned the NDAA coverage and all of the ins and outs. It's actually kind of cool because the NDAA had some AI stuff, which was our tech coverage, had some financial services and housing stuff, which didn't make it in, but we were just all over this. It was a multidimensional story for us, which actually played to our strengths.
And Briana will be joining us, Jake, at the very end of the show to preview what we can expect from their reporting and what she is watching in early 2026.
And a great guest, as always, Jeanne Shaheen of the great state of New Hampshire, a longtime fixture in New Hampshire and New Hampshire politics, former governor, and nearing the end of her time on Capitol Hill. She's retiring at the end of this Congress, but she is in the middle of literally every issue, whether it's defense, funding, foreign policy, healthcare. She has just placed herself in the middle, and that's a familiar position for her, to be honest with you. She's in the middle of a lot of things.
I could not think of a better guest this week. She's a moderate consensus seeker. She's leaving the chamber, as you noted, at the end of 2026. She is the second ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee and was the first woman, Jake, ever to serve as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. She's also, as you mentioned, leading a lot of the negotiations, talking to members of both parties on how they can maybe find a pathway forward on healthcare. We will get to our interview with Senator Shaheen right after a quick word from our presenting sponsor, Pharma.
Did you know that America is the only country in the world where half of every dollar spent on brand medicines goes to entities that don't make them? It's true. Learn more at phrma.org/middlemen.
Welcome to Flyout Day and to the Punchbowl News Townhouse, Senator Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
And a very busy time, especially for issues you care a lot about. Let's talk about...
Which are a lot of issues, to be clear.
That is true.
That's true.
We're going to zero in on healthcare first. Today, these healthcare votes, we're destined maybe to fail. Is it a mistake for Senate Democrats to offer a clean 3-year extension, knowing the fact, rather than something that resembles more what the White House was going to propose? You had said you thought it was a good framework.
Look, I think we need to get through these votes today, and then I'm hopeful that there are a lot of conversations going on. We know the House has got 2 bills that are ready for a discharge petition that are bipartisan, and I'm hopeful that we can get back to negotiating and come up with a compromise that we can actually pass.
So this was kind of like a necessary step in your mind to then get to the real discussions?
I think so. And I'm hopeful that we're going to get back to a bill because people are really going to be suffering as the result of these rate increases. We heard from a woman yesterday at a hearing that Senator Warner and I did. She's from Virginia. She's a small business owner in healthcare, and her premiums are going to go up from $500 and something to $1,500 without the tax credit. She said it's not affordable.
Yeah, it's going to be a striking change for a lot of people and unaffordable for a lot of people. I wonder, you mentioned the House discharge petitions, which are, we wrote about it this morning. It's stunning just how many discharge petitions there are, and the angst in the House, which is, I've been doing this for a long time, more pronounced than I've probably ever seen before. So there's the Fitzpatrick discharge petition. Josh Gottheimer has a discharge petition. Both are kind of gaining steam. Democrats are trying to figure out which one they want to live with or which one they could live with. I guess I'll ask this in two parts. Have you been in touch with the discharge petitioners?
Yes.
Yes, you have. Okay. And which one? I mean, I think Fitzpatrick is a little bit more stringent, less friendly to Democrats. At least that's what people say. And the Gottheimer one seems to be something that more Democrats could stomach. Do you have a view on these bills?
I don't. My hope is that they might be able to reach some agreement in the House so that it's only one bill that comes out. Now, that may be optimistic to think that.
I think that's right, because I think Democrats will have to pick which one.
They're going to pick a horse.
Yeah.
And that we can then, that will propel something in the House. And I think one of the arguments in the Senate has been, well, it doesn't matter if we get anything through the Senate because the House will never take up anything. But they're proving that that's not the case.
It has to start in the House, actually, I think,
that they're actually going to get something done. So I think it's all helpful. And it reminds the public that this is an issue. They're paying attention now in a way that they weren't months ago. And that we've got to address it.
Could I just piggyback off that for a second? The question I heard this morning in the House was, especially from House Democrats, is, okay, well, if we sign on to one of these discharge petitions, what's John Thune going to do? Because I think the opposite could be asked, right? Is John Thune, do you think Thune will take this up? Will take up something that comes out of the House if it passes with, 215 Democrats and 5 Republicans? I mean, what's your view on that?
I think if there is a compromise agreement in the Senate that can build on whatever's happening in the House, and the frustrating thing is we're not that far apart in conversations. It's pretty clear what a compromise bill could look like. And in the short term, we need to do that because we need to provide relief to people who are really going to be affected. And it's not just those people who are going to lose their premium tax credits and their health insurance. That's going to have a huge impact across the healthcare system. It means the estimates for uncompensated care, so care that's provided in emergency rooms that hospitals aren't going to get paid for, that's over $7 billion. It's going to affect those of us who have employer-sponsored health insurance because our insurance is going to go up. So this is something that needs to be addressed. And beyond that, long-term, we need to address the rising costs of healthcare. And I think part of what this conversation has generated is a recognition that we've really got to work together to do that.
I want to look back for a minute. Do you think forcing a shutdown over the Obamacare subsidies was worth it? It obviously served a political purpose. As you said, it has raised this issue to a national attention ahead of the midterms. But was it the right tactic, given that we're now headed towards potentially the expiration of these subsidies? The rubber's meeting the road here in the real world.
Well, it is. And I think without that, people would not have realized who was responsible for those rate increases and also that they were happening because it was designed, under the big betrayal bill, as I call it, that was passed this summer. There was an effort to extend those tax credits as part of that. That got defeated. And they would have just expired and people would have seen those rate increases and not known who was responsible and not known that there is an effort to address that, and we need to do that.
So it was the right tactic.
Look, hindsight is always 20/20, so you never know. Yeah. But I think my goal from the beginning of the shutdown was to end the shutdown and to try and do something about the healthcare costs. And so we were able to end the shutdown finally, and now we need to work on the healthcare costs.
Do you think healthcare is the defining issue of 2026?
Well, I think the affordability, which is, the president calls a hoax, but I think the cost of living, which is really about affordability, and healthcare is a big piece of that. As I talk to my constituents and think about what I need to do as somebody who is working on behalf of the people of New Hampshire, people need a good job. They need to see opportunities so they can support their families. They want a place to live, a decent house, and they want health care. They want to know that when their kids get sick, when their loved ones get sick, that they can go and they'll be taken care of. And so it's one of those top three in my mind that people need in order to be able to feel secure about their families and their futures.
If you could script a line for Trump not to say, affordability is a hoax is probably one of the top lines for Republicans to not say. But anyway, government funding, January 30th, you're involved in that too. How confident are you that there's going to be some sort of solution to prevent a shutdown at the end of January?
One of the things that I thought was important about ending the shutdown, and part of that agreement that we reached, was that we were going to take up appropriations bills. Yeah. And we've got a commitment in the Senate anyway to do that, to take up the significant portions of funding government in this next term after we get back from January. And if we do that, we will have funded about 90% of government. And I think that will allow us to move past the January 30th deadline.
You got a number of provisions in the NDAA, so let's talk about that, including language paving the way for a repeal of sanctions on Syria. You went to Syria in August, not a place a lot of people, particularly Americans, are going. How confident are you that they can be a reliable partner?
Well,
how long do we have?
No, it's a long conversation. Yeah. Look, we have an opportunity in Syria that we haven't had in half a century with the overthrow of Assad. And we've got somebody and al-Shara, the president, who has a background that we would all like to see different. But
he was a member of al-Qaeda, right?
Yes.
Right.
But in his time as an interim president since freeing Syria from Assad, he has moved in the right direction. He's getting support. He's addressing, they've joined the anti-ISIS coalition. They're negotiating with Israel on trying to get a secure border with Israel. They have had some elections there, and he's expanding his cabinet. Not as broad as I would like to see, but addressing some of the human rights and abuses and trying to hold people accountable. So he's been moving in the right direction, making the right moves, getting a lot of support from the United States and from other countries, which is very important. He's starting from zero, right? This is a country that experienced 14 years of civil war. They are down 3 million houses because when the Civil War started, construction basically stopped. They've had virtually no civil society under the Assad regime. And so they're really starting from scratch, but there is an opportunity there. They are keeping the Iranians out, which is very important. They just interdicted a huge cache of weapons that was going into Lebanon from Iran that they were able to stop and help us capture those weapons. So it's important for us to continue to support those efforts. So
let me ask you this, and probably there are very few people who are as practiced at foreign policy as you are, as we could see by Andrew's travel bills when he goes around the world, chasing you guys. I just have to imagine that in the back of your mind and all the other folks who are involved in this, in your minds, is that this is a guy who was at Al-Qaeda. And I just wonder how much skepticism you have lingering in the back of your head that maybe he's not up to he's up to no good.
No, I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, and he's made the right moves. And I had a chance to see him in August when we were in Damascus, and then I had a chance to see him again at the UN General Assembly when he was there. And then I had a chance to see him again when he was in here and meeting in Congress. And I can see a real, I don't want to use the term progress, but I've seen a real change in how he is responding, how his thoughtful responses to questions, how he addresses people and seems to be thinking about the challenges ahead in Syria. And it's important. It's important for us because there isn't a plan B there. There's nobody to take over. And if he's gone, the potential for civil war to break out again is huge. So it's important for us to continue to support him. And, one of the things that happened when we were there in Damascus. He took us up to his personal office in the palace, what had been Assad's huge palace on a hill overlooking Damascus. And he said something that I thought was very poignant. He said, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is look out over Damascus. And the last thing I do at night before I go to bed is look out over Damascus, because Syria is sick and we need to help her. And, that spoke to me as somebody who cares about the country that he's representing.
Yep.
Let's talk about national security at home. The administration just released its official national security strategy. It's essentially the Trump 2.0 worldview. The White House is calling it Trump's version of the Monroe Doctrine. I imagine you see it differently.
I think the national security strategy doesn't address the very real threats that this country is facing. I think, Venezuela is a failed state. I would like to see Maduro gone, but Venezuela is not a threat to the United States. I think obviously we would all like to see an end to the cartels and drug trafficking, and we need to do everything we can to stop that. But to put the firepower that we have in the Caribbean now, when we've left the Red Sea open, when we've taken boats out of the Indo-Pacific, when we don't have carriers, the fleet that we need if we have to evacuate Americans out of some of the African countries where there's real conflict, that is not protecting America's future.
Well, one more question on foreign policy. You were at the center of a bizarre series of events as it relates to Russia and Ukraine and this 28-point plan for ending the war, which was under fire from senators in both parties. You and Senator Rounds had a call with Secretary Rubio in which he said this was a Russian document. You said that publicly. You and Rounds said that publicly. And then Rubio said that's actually not true. What the hell happened? I mean, was that it? Is that what happened?
Well, based on the conversation we had with Secretary Rubio, it sounded to me like it was a document that had been prepared in Russia. And if you looked at the 28-point plan, it was clearly Russia's ideal view for what should happen to end the war in Ukraine. That is not where I think most members of Congress are. There is bipartisan support for Ukraine. They have been courageous in their fight against Russia. They have withstood they're into now almost the fourth year of war. And the Biden administration said Kyiv would fall in about 3 weeks. The Trump administration seems to be taking that approach too, that Kyiv is going to fall. And yet they continue to be there. They're still addressing corruption. We need to do more work on that. And Ukraine, the president needs to do more work on that. But the only thing that's really going to bring Russia to the table in any substantive way is to put pressure on Russia. We need to pass the Graham-Blumenthal secondary sanctions bill. Russia's economy is on the verge of failing. We need to make sure that Putin knows that we are serious. We need to provide long-range weapons to Ukraine. We need to continue to support them. And unless we do that, Putin is going to be successful. And it's not in America's interest. And one of the concerns I have about the national security strategy is that it barely mentions Russia, and it mentions it not in the threatening terms that Russia poses to the United States, but only in terms of economic interests in the future. Well, that's not something that Putin responds to. He responds to pressure, to strength, and the Trump administration has not shown that. And it's frankly an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to President Trump. It's an embarrassment to the United States. And why he tolerates it is beyond me.
We are quickly running out of time, Jake. We had a lot more questions to get to, but we always end these with some rapid fire.
I heard that.
We'll start with that. Give Chuck Schumer a grade. Our recent Canvas poll of insiders on Capitol Hill had him as the worst performing leader on Capitol Hill.
Look, it's a tough position. I voted for Chuck. And so I don't think giving him a grade is helpful.
This is a more serious question, or that was a serious question too, but you've been at the negotiating table a lot over the last couple of years. You have steered Congress's way out of a lot of pickles, let's say, and you work across the aisle in the foreign policy realm as well. What happens when people like you leave? I mean, who is behind you? Like, who else is there on your side of the aisle, on the Republican side of the aisle, when you are gone, and others to carry the torch, to have those conversations?
Well, I'm hoping that Chris Pappas will get elected to my seat, and he has worked across the aisle and has done a great job and has a good history and understands the challenges facing this country. But it's concerning that we have gotten more and more partisan in how we address issues facing the country, because we can only be successful if we work together. And it's what this country is built on, compromise. And we've got to get back to understanding that we don't always get everything we want when we're trying to address policy. We've got to figure out how to work together. And, I was having this conversation with one of my fellow women senators who was on the other side of the aisle today, in fact, and we were talking about the fact that people have to learn to trust each other. And you can't trust each other if you don't know each other.
All right. This is a more fun one. Jake got the serious one out of the way. You go on a lot of codels. Any specific countries you're looking to travel to during your final year in office?
Yes, I would like to go back to the Indo-Pacific. I would like to go to the Western Balkans again. I've spent a lot of time in the Balkans, and it's a region that I feel really strongly about. And I'd love to go back to the Middle East.
All right. And that's a busy calendar.
Senators luckily have a lot of ability to do that. Your daughter is running, and she, that's an interesting dynamic. She blasted the deal that you cut to end the government shutdown. My children are young, but they criticize me for everything anyway. Awkward Thanksgiving or cool?
No, I find it interesting that everybody asked me how Thanksgiving was. We went to her house as we have for the last 12 years.
Did you have a food taster first?
No, her husband cooks. He always cooks. We always brought a dish. But listen, I knew where she was. She knew where I was. And she's going to be a great independent member of Congress. She's done a lot of work on health care, and she will make that a real focus. Her oldest daughter, our oldest granddaughter, has type 1 diabetes. And so she's been fighting the health care fight for many years. And she'll be great.
All right, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Only in America does half of every dollar spent on brand medicines go to entities that don't make them. But the American biopharmaceutical companies that do are investing $500 billion in new infrastructure and manufacturing here at home, and driving more than $1.2 trillion in total economic impact. Tell Washington to end middleman markups and put American patients first. Visit phrma.org/middlemen.
All right, and we are back to break down the conversation with the senator, with Bob Costa of CBS, our very own Andrew Desiderio, coming back for, I think, your three-peats. Welcome back.
Hi, and guys.
Bob, the recent award winner of the 4th Estate Award at the National Press Club. Anna, I could tell you this for sure. Bob Woodward will not be toasting us.
I wouldn't pull that out.
It's okay.
I have to pay Jake to be there.
It might be Brez who toasts us, and he may or may not show up. He'll tell us he'll be there. It'll be, 7:06. He's about to go on at 7:15 and be like, sorry, I'm home for the night.
I feel good when you can pull Jake Sherman away from, he has an actual family, kids, and he gets up at 2, 3 a.m.
Four.
So to come to an evening event, I was honored.
As the clock ticked closer to 9:30, I was like, I hope I don't fall asleep. Don't fall asleep.
All right. To the topic of the day. Andrew, we just had Senator Shaheen, someone who you know very well. Let's talk healthcare, because that is the biggest game in town right now.
Yeah, well, first off, very interesting that in her last year in office, she's pretty much injecting herself into like all of the biggest issues that Congress has to deal with. But on healthcare, I thought it was interesting that she seemed to indicate that the path here to get something bipartisan, which I still think is a very uphill climb, is going to be through the House and these discharge petitions, because these bills are, I think, the only proposals out there that are truly bipartisan. Now, I do think Democrats have a little bit of an upper hand after today, because the Senate voted on the Republican proposal, the Democratic proposal. The Republican one got only Republican votes. Only Rand Paul voted against it. But the Democratic plan, which is a 3-year clean extension of the ACA subsidies, got 4 Republican votes. So it was Josh Hawley, it was Dan Sullivan, which I think is an indicator of where this issue is for 2026 and for the midterms, because he's up in 2026, and then Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. So Democrats can now say that some sort of extension here of the subsidies is bipartisan, and they can use that now in the negotiations. And I think that helps them for sure, and maybe gets us a little bit closer to a solution here. Again, I still think it's really, really going to be difficult.
That's the thing that was interesting too, is that she's talking to these House guys.
Yeah.
I mean, that you don't usually see the cross chamber at that level.
Well, it's interesting. A few weeks ago, she actually revealed that she was on a frequent text chain with Lisa Murkowski and Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican from the House, obviously. So she's used to doing this kind of stuff, but not usually with House members. She usually keeps it in the Senate.
I wanted to say two things here and ask one question to Bob. Number one, I agree with you that it shows two things to me. Number one, what you said, right? Where this issue is for 26. It also shows that if the House passes something, the Senate will probably take it up and probably be able to pass it. That's number two. And Bob, let's zoom out for a second, because you and I covered 2010, 2011, when healthcare was like the biggest issue in the world. Republicans have consistently pulled in the garbage on healthcare. I mean, we could say that definitively. I'm surprised that they are embracing a healthcare conversation. Mike Johnson told me a couple of days ago, this is going to go into the first or second quarter. It's an interesting position for Brian Fitzpatrick, who you know pretty well from your neck of the woods in Pennsylvania. What do you make of all this?
Well, Congressman Fitzpatrick, he's in a tough district. And so it's not surprising for him to try to move to the center on this. And whether it's Ukraine or healthcare, Fitzpatrick's always kind of an instigator for bipartisanship. Whenever I go home to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, you never see Brian Fitzpatrick Republican. Nice. Brian Fitzpatrick, voice for Bucks County, green signs. You're like,
and they're not red or blue, which is interesting. That's how Bucks County is, right?
And Senator Shaheen, she struck me on her answer on Leader Schumer.
Me too.
When you go on social media, you think you would be fair to imagine. It would be fair to imagine that you would think the Democrats nationwide are up in arms about Leader Schumer, that a lot of liberals want him out.
Yep.
She was so muted. That's the real reality in the Senate Democratic group. They don't want to oust Senator Schumer. And if they do, they're not going to say it to Punchbowl News. They're not going to say it to anybody, because there's still this kind of level of respect for him as the convener of the party in the Senate.
And Senator Shaheen she negotiated that bipartisan deal, and she was very careful around the time that the deal went through to not say what Schumer's level of involvement was, because I'm sure there was a conversation had where they talked about this and Schumer blessed the effort and said, okay, go forward with this.
I thought it was notable to me, and I'm sure I'll get in a fight with you and Brez and everyone else about this later, for her to say it's not helpful for me to give him a grade. To me,
in a pass-fail scenario, that is a fail.
Yeah, I would be a little bit. She was very muted. She was very careful. She didn't say he has to go.
But maybe she wants to keep his fingerprints off whatever she's doing.
Oh, I think
it doesn't seem like she's an emissary for Schumer,
and that's guilty for her and for him, right?
Protects her independence in the negotiations, because no one wants to be dealing with if she's seen as his person. But she's also the kind of person, she's muted enough. I'd be surprised if she wasn't back channeling him at updates on some of it.
For sure.
She had to, right? He's the leader. And you don't want to go against your leader, right? And that's why it was so fascinating that around the time this deal went through, she was not directly answering any of those questions, because Schumer, for his own sake and for his own standing within the caucus, had to be opposed to this deal. But I still do think that those 8 Democrats who supported the deal to end the shutdown probably represented maybe 1 or 2 other Democrats in the caucus as well. They were the ones willing to take the heat, in other words, for it.
One of the things I thought was interesting is the question you asked, Jake, about how, she really has been this kind of negotiator, deal maker, and her retirement leaves a big void there. And I thought it was notable. You said Republican, Democrat. She didn't mention a single person who's currently elected who she thinks is going to be in that role.
Yeah, I was fascinated by it. I think, listen, there's no question that this has been on short supply in recent years. And I don't know, Bob, what do you think? I mean, the politics, it's funny because it seems to me, you travel a lot around the country, that people want bipartisanship. They want that idea of the two parties working together, yet it's almost in no one's political interest to actually execute that anymore, right?
And she really matters. I mean, let's remember which state she represents, New Hampshire. One thing that always stands out to me about her is when I first started covering New Hampshire years ago, going up for the New Hampshire primary, one of the first things I saw in Manchester was an old black and white picture of Jimmy Carter coming to New Hampshire 50 years ago when he was running for president in 1976. And there was this striking couple greeting Jimmy Carter in 1975, 1976, and it was Billy and Jeanne Shaheen.
Yeah.
They have been power brokers in New Hampshire for over a half century, and they have defined the New Hampshire Democratic Party as more of a centrist party.
Yep.
And so let's not forget, right next door is Senator Bernie Sanders in Vermont. And so with her gone, is New Hampshire going to move in a more progressive direction if someone wins this primary? I mean, it seems like her daughter for the House seat is moving in a certain direction, but you never know. If someone like her is around so long as governor, as senator, they really create an identity for the state's Democratic Party. And without her there to stoke that fire, it's vulnerable to either shift left or toward the center even more.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the story of the Senate of the last decade is just the hollowing out of the middle, right?
Yep.
Joe Manchin's not there anymore. Kirsten Sinema's not there anymore. Mitt Romney obviously was only there for a term. Same with Kirsten Sinema as well. But I mean, Rob Portman, right? He was someone who was going to be serving for a lot longer than he ended up serving for, probably. You saw Bob Corker decide not to run for re-election in 2018. That shocked a lot of people. Jeff Flake, Roy Blunt. I mean, like
Roy Blunt, who was not seen as a bipartisan deal maker in the House,
but ended up becoming one in the Senate. And so to your point about like, you don't get rewarded for bipartisanship anymore. No, you get rewarded for going to your respective side and digging your heels in, which is what we saw during the shutdown, which is why it made it so hard for Shaheen to get enough Democrats on board with this. And she did say at the time as well that more Democrats than just those 8 told her earlier in the day that they were going to be a yes, and then eventually voted against it. I think that tells you everything you need to know.
All right, speed round. That's not going to fly. Bob, you go first.
Well, the big thing that's not going to fly is, in the eyes of many House Republicans I've spoken with, is President Trump's answer on the economy. But it's so striking to me that they'll say it to you all, they'll say it to me, but they don't want to say it to him. And when I called up some White House sources the other day, I said, well, what do you make of it? There's such a dismissal of this critique from 1600. They really believe the economy is strong, that anything that's going poorly with the economy is President Biden's fault. And there's this kind of resistance to even having the conversation. And that's something I find is likely to be a dynamic in the coming months ahead of the midterms.
Completely agree with you. I'll take the next one here. And I might eat my words at some point because things change quickly. It's not going to fly for Mike Johnson, that is, to send the House home early next week. Just not going to work. They cannot let these Obamacare tax credits expire in December without even giving it a try on the floor. I mean, they're going to argue, and you could see this coming, that they're going to argue that neither the Democratic nor the Republican proposal in the Senate got 60 votes. This is not an area where they could get something through, and they could pull up stakes. I think it would be a really bad look to leave. Today's the 11th, the 12th, to leave for the month, the 12th, when these things expire at the end of the month.
I mean, sending him home during the shutdown, what did he come back to? A bunch of pissed off members and more discharge petitions than we've ever seen. Yep. If he sends them home next week, because if you're somebody who wants to do a vote on this, afraid of what's going to happen on the floor, I mean, that does not look like a leader. I think that is going to cause more problems for him. I agree with you. Andrew.
So mine is very simple. Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, Republican of Florida, invited the Russian ambassador to the United States to her annual Christmas party.
She's just spreading the cheer.
You know, her whole thing is like, we want peace, we want peace, we want peace. But I think, what most folks here in Washington and on Capitol Hill would agree with is that you don't pursue peace at any cost. And she obviously also had those very mysterious meetings with Russian officials in Miami as well last month. So a concerning streak, but again, she's a backbencher, if you will, in the House of Representatives. So it's not like this is the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee or something doing this.
All right. Last one real quick. The NDAA, there was a watered down provision. We all live in D.C. That the administration moved forward with to limit air capital, the airspace. And they all the four corners had made an agreement, and they made some exceptions. Big
big issue.
Yeah, DCA is already a mess, as we could all attest to.
I actually think it's a great airport.
It is, but they have a lot of...
It's easy in, easy out if there's no traffic.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Bob, Andrew, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Briana, welcome to the Punchbowl News Townhouse.
Thank you so much for having me.
We are excited. You are one of 2 members of our new defense policy vertical. We launched this week with a tremendous quarterly edition as well as a fun event.
And well, it feels like Brianna's been here for like 8 years now, but because she was here before the launch. But yes, it's been the event was cool. It was a really cool event. We had, I mean, you could talk more about people who were there because I kind of, I knew some people, but they weren't necessarily directly in my room.
Mr. Social. That's what I like to call Jay. Mr. Social.
I was hiding in the corner hoping that no one spoke to it. No, I'm kidding.
Talk to us about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me touch on the event first because it was a really great showing of energy behind this new product. And I think what made it really special for us, for Anthony and me on the defense team, is that we had a great cross-section of people, right? We had industry representation, we had DoD representation, and we had Hill representation. And all of those 3 camps are the ones that we're going to focus on in our coverage. And I think that's what makes this product especially unique. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity.
I felt like the energy in the room was so incredible. People were saying how excited they were, how they thought the first quarterly coverage had gone really well. But we're always thinking about what's next here at Punchbowl News. Talk to us about 2 to 3 things to watch going into 2026.
Absolutely. The national defense strategy will be huge. We had the national security strategy released last week, but obviously that'll tee up the NDS once it comes out in 2026. And then, of course, we're going to keep an eye on defense appropriations along with Sammy Handler and the defense spending bill, the NDAA. Implementation on that is going to be key. And of course, the budget rollout will inform the FY27 NDAA as well.
And also, I mean, let's just also zoom out for a second. I mean, we have, of course, the situation in the Middle East. Of course, the situation between Russia and Ukraine, the situation with NATO, which is not only a foreign policy question, but also at its heart, a military question and a national defense question and a U.S. place in the world question. And it has to do with not only all of that, but also weapon systems and all sorts of things that play into our coverage. But now also at the same time, we have a blossoming, burgeoning, we don't know what to call it, situation in the Caribbean with Venezuela, in which the United States has just seized an oil tanker. There's a ton of ships in the Caribbean Sea off of Venezuela. I mean, it is a very interesting time.
Well, all of those dynamics are key, but I think one of the things that we've talked a lot about is the idea around just like the new ecosystem, right? And players, right? There's a ton of new players on Capitol Hill, relevant members of the committee. You've got in the industry, I mean, AI, technology. I mean, it has to be, I mean, you've been covering this for a long time, but I imagine it's such a rich story because the world, kind of what, geopolitical world that you're talking about, but then also just the changing of the guard, really.
Absolutely. The defense prime contractors, and we're talking about Boeing, RTX, that sort of vein of contractor, they are sort of being challenged in a real way by this administration and by this up and coming class of new defense startups. And this potential power shift is something that we will keep track of very, very closely, especially as it comes to implementing some of the acquisition changes that were included in this version of the NDAA. So there's a lot there at play, and we'll see too how lawmakers build on those in the coming year.
And also, I'll say the administration's kind of fostering this new climate between the primes and the upstarts. They want this competition. They're eager to have it.
And we will be covering all of that. Thank you so much for joining us. We're super excited for the launch of the Defense Policy Vertical. You can subscribe, go to punchbowl.news and get all of the coverage that we will be delivering starting in January 2026. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will catch you next week for another episode of Flyout Day, our last flyout day of 2025.
Have a great weekend, a great rest of the week. It's only a couple days left. GW versus Florida, Saturday, live from Sunrise, Florida. Let's go Revolutionaries. It's a big, big moment for the program.
It's also the Army, the football game. So any more in our vein of, besides the Jake Sherman.
Revolutionaries, let's go. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, everybody.